So, Lil Jesus is back, but also rest in peace, Lil Jesus. It's a little complicated. However, the release of Too Pure for This World has brought about a rebirth of sorts for Lil Jesus, who is now known as Acai. For the purpose of this review, I'll be referring to Acai as Lil Jesus since this is a Lil Jesus album, after all. So, for the purpose of staying organized, the review will be split into three parts. Part one will be a breakdown of the first few tracks to establish context and an overview of the rest. Part two will be explaining the eerie and most likely unintentional similarities that this album shares with a completely different rap album that I happen to hold in high regard. And part three will be my closing thoughts and a star rating, just for fun. So, starting with tracks 1 and 2, game data and bios. So, right from the get go, it's established that what you're listening to is a concept album. And it's a clear separation from Lil Jesus' prior work. Those albums were somewhat collections of music with a vague theme behind it all. Particularly visible with Supersonic. I think Cyber Summer and 22 were more, sort of loose collections arranged. But what's different about Too Pure for This World is the intense focus and narrative weaving going on throughout the whole album. So the narrative here is that the listener is being granted exclusive access to the Angel Drive console. And the purpose of the console is to translate soul discs into different formats. And what we're listening to is a audio translation of Little Jesus' soul uploaded to a soul disc. This can be seen on the album cover. The imagery of the angel wing on the right, the devil wing on the left, and a glowing figure in the middle. My interpretation is that the different songs are wrapped throughout the album through three different perspectives that can be seen on the album cover. The angelic side of Little Jesus starts the album and can be heard in the sort of high-pitched auto-tuned style, which he had used before just as more of a stylistic choice, but now it serves to tell a narrative. And then you have the pragmatic side of Little Jesus, constitutes a majority of the songs here. It's just sort of normal tone and cadence of rapping. And the shadow self, I would say, makes an appearance on one particular song, but I will delve into that later. So, track 3, Versions of You That Exist in the Hearts of Others, is sort of where the main conflict of Lil Jesus' soul is established and somewhat explained. But for some context, in 2019, Lil Jesus gained a significant following, not all of his following, but like a shit ton of new people, from uploading what were basically meme songs, meme raps, that tapped into the overarching message of the America First movement, which is led by a political podcaster named Nicholas J. Fuentes. With that community following and commenting on, Lil Jesus' social media, it came with a set of expectations, basically. Particularly embracing Catholicism, rejecting cultural degeneracy, that sort of thing. So Lil Jesus explained that he didn't quite fit into that box, or any boxes really, and wanted to figure those kind of things out for himself. And as a result, he was promptly canceled by a vast majority of the movement, though Fuentes himself wasn't as harsh, I suppose, about it as most were, but that feeling of ostracization forced Lil Jesus to go inward and sort of rebuild himself and reflect on the kind of person he wants to be. These manifestations of naysayers on this skit are answered with the next track, track 3, I'm Back, which is like a rapid-fire assault of lyrics that establishes Little Jesus as someone who embraces genuinity over conformity. I remember he once said on Twitter, quote, "I'd rather be genuine and cringe than fake and cool." Which I think is explicitly expressed on this track. And, you know, sort of expressed on the album as a whole. Now, with some context, we can kind of go through the highlights here. Auditory autism, really, really good flow. And the flow of all of these tracks in general, and the sort of aesthetic that is being created of this, the Angel Drive, which is heavily inspired by the sounds of the Dreamcast. There's a lot of Dreamcast samples here. So very nostalgic, very ethereal, very airy, very floaty a lot of the time. And it is brilliantly communicated throughout the entire album. And this is far and away his best production value he's ever put on. I can see why, you know, he took his time with this album, because of how polished off it is compared to his previous work. His previous work wasn't bad by any means, but it was clearly a developing artist and developing producers getting out their thoughts and feelings. While this feels like this is a narrative work. This is a a concept album that is thought-provoking, that is giving you a clear picture of someone's soul, their genuine thoughts and feelings. I think American is really a really good example of the confusing nature of modern politics and how that blends into or molds the online world, because Little Jesus, being a very online person, you could say, his day-to-day life revolves around the online culture quite a bit, from my observation. The lyrics express the push and pull. I don't want to be, a tool for an election cycle. I don't, those sort of mixed uncertainty. Those feelings are expressed really, really succinctly, and makes for it's only 1 minute and 54 seconds, and it's like, it says so much. The album itself is only 29 minutes, but it says so much, which is astounding to me, personally. And then we have, I like Skies quite a bit, track 10. That's when we really get into the floaty, airy, ethereal aesthetic going on, and you can almost barely hear the angelic side of Little Jesus rapping, but it flows so well, and it creates such a great aesthetic and atmosphere that sucks you in for, again, only 1 minute and 49 seconds. But the thing is, it can be short, but it can also be sweet, which I would describe the record as a whole. And then we have For Her, which is right after, and it wouldn't be a Little Jesus album without some sort of introspection on women and girlfriends that feel a no girlfriend and such. It wouldn't be a Little Jesus album without one. But this is definitely his strongest sentimental piece about women and romance, for sure. Because the way he communicates the heartbreak that he feels, there's a sense of nakedness to it that you really, really don't see a lot from a lot of artists, because they feel, despite Little Jesus creating a persona and a narrative, he reveals himself more so than ever here. And I think that's a testament to his writing ability that's developed this far. Neat Life, track 14, really sums up the and is sort of being confronted with these negative thoughts and emotions from being, so insular and online all the time. And that's when sort of the shadow self starts to slowly take control, and it's communicated and expressed at the end of towards the end of the track, when it sort of breaks down into this darker ethereal tone that carries all the way to the end, and then we get into track 15, which is a particular standout translator, which is where the full shadow self of Little Jesus is embraced and has manifested, has been sort of boiling and has been building in the background this whole time, and is spilled over here, has been unleashed, and this sort of giant snarling monster has reared its head and makes itself known. And this is just total raw emotion. This is raw anger. This is frustration. This is, everything that Little Jesus had been holding back in his head, just spilled out entirely. The painful mantra of "maybe then they'll love me" really sums up this internal struggle that Little Jesus has been manifesting this whole time, and that is spilt over, and that is erupted. Trying to being online all the time and trying to please these people has made a monster of himself, in a sense. And then we get to track 16, 2020, which is sort of a turnaround, a optimistic outlook at what could be, in the end. High hopes for a new beginning, a rebirth, and then life to close out sounds more like a goodbye, more like a parting message, a farewell, to include with his tombstone with a USB drive to sort of archive all of this. All of this is what he's been feeling, and it is, it's pottery, as they say in the meme. It is it's very fitting for the motif of the album, the overarching theme. He reflects that, in the end, hopefully there's something to be worth celebrated. There's something that is ends up as being some sort of accomplishment rather than just sort of nothingness, which, esoterically speaking, was kind of what we sort of reach out to spirituality for, the greater meaning, the greater purpose of, all the suffering that we go through. Which brings us to the end of the record, and the similarities I feel that this record has with Yay by Kanye West. Now, I know what you're thinking. Those albums are so different in terms of production value and lyrical content. And look, the similarities or the parallels is with the themes of the album. albums in this case. We're comparing the two. Ye had sort of been ostracized by everyone for embracing MAGA, the MAGA movement, um, at least on like a superficial level. And that caused him to look inwardly and look at what his condition was with being bipolar, um, and sort of reflecting on that, addressing his shadow self as he does in the first track. And it's just very, very eerie how similar the themes are to Too Pure for This World, because they're both dealing with a sudden, like an overnight change that makes them stop and reflect why it is they're doing what they're doing. What does it mean to the people around them? Um, and what kind of person do they really want to be? And um, I just thought that was particularly worth noting, because "Yay" by Kanye is one of my favorite records of all time, and I sort of noticed these parallels, and I thought that was kind of neat. So to close, in conclusion, this is like my favorite record of 2020 thus far. I haven't listened to. I've probably listened to 19 or so records this year, and this one's far and away my favorite. Not off of production value alone. I think music can be a lot more than that. Personally, I think what's being presented here is, very raw, very emotional, very tugging at the heartstrings a little bit, but ultimately embraces genuinity and creativity overall. And that is something worth recognizing. That's something worth respecting. So for me, it's 5 stars out of 5 for sure. And I'll be dropping the SoundCloud link in the description, as well as the Little Jesus website, which I assume he's going to update to Acai and that sort of persona, and new merch along the way, and I'll update the description when that happens. But yeah, go check it out. Really good stuff, and yeah, that's about it. So smash that like button, click subscribe if you enjoyed, and have an excellent day.